I was laid off at 50, being at the peak of my career. Is it ageism? Is it like the market right now? What is going on? And probably a little bit of everything.
When you get to be over 40, corporate America is done with you. Once you're over 40, especially once you're over 45, and if you're nearing or over 50, you are a short timer.
I got laid off from my job in August due to budget cuts. Budget cuts really was, I worked at a nonprofit. It was really because my previous manager, who was about 15 years younger than me, felt threatened by any type of a successful older female.
I colored my hair and got Botox and filler for a job interview. Do I feel strongly enough about ageism, especially ageism against women in the workplace, to make sure that I am putting my best foot or face forward, as it were? Absolutely.
Got friends, associates, you're getting laid off, been on your job 25, 30 years, you capped out on the salary. Now they're trying to bring in younger people at a lower cost.
I received a comment on a post that I made yesterday about being laid off for over a year. And the comment was, you've been laid off over a year. Are you trying not to work? And why can't you go down to your local store and get a job? So I made a post about over a month ago talking about how I was laid off at 50, being at the peak of my career. And thousands of you replied saying you're going through the same thing. Is it ageism? Is it like the market right now? What is going on? And probably a little bit of everything. I know that I've gone to apply for work at entry-level positions as an example to one company. And this has happened several times, but this one particular company said, we just don't think you'd be happy in this position, it being entry level and you're not being challenged. Well, I applied to a director position or a leader position in that same company, and they said, you know what, we're actually hiring internally. We're just hiring outside because of a survey that we're doing. So basically wasting my time. This isn't just one company. This has happened several times to me, working with recruiters, and the recruiters coming back and saying, you know what, they're putting the position on hold. So they're gonna, I don't know. It just ends up being something. I've applied to hundreds of jobs. That's why I've turned to TikTok, so that I can try to make some money here or start a business or do something else, because I'm not just going to sit around, even though I'm still applying to work, doing everything I can. But the comment about going down to your local store, yeah, I've tried that too. So they say you're too overqualified. Again, you're not going to be happy here. I even had someone make a comment saying that they went to Trader Joe's to try to get a job and they were denied because they are overqualified. Our local Costco isn't even hiring. A lot of our places around where I'm living are not hiring. So I don't know. That comment was a little bit.
The crazy part about this is that 50 is not even old. As she mentioned, she was laid off pretty much a little bit after mid-career. She was hitting her peak and she got laid off, which is a terrible time to get laid off. It's always a terrible time to get laid off. But in particular, the timing of being laid off when you are at the peak of your career is very, very difficult, because number one, when you go back to get another job, you're most likely not going to make the same amount of money you were making before you got laid off, unless you go and do more of a consultancy role. The jobs I worked at in the past, where I've seen older workers on my teams, a lot of times they've been there in advisory roles or consultancy roles. And a lot of times they're not even W-2 employees, they're more contract. And I think that's because the company is a little bit non-committal with them. A lot of times when they're hiring for someone at a high level, like a director position, they do have someone in mind internally who already knows the lay of the land, who knows the business, who's very familiar with the people there. It's just an easier, smoother transition as opposed to hiring someone externally. And like she said, a lot of companies that have entry-level positions don't want to hire someone who's older because they have all these preconceived notions in their head about how they're going to be stuck in their ways. They may not be as technologically savvy. They may demand a higher salary than what they want to pay that person. So you're in this weird middle area.
If you're over 40, you should prepare to be a consultant. I know that since all of the layoffs are now hitting the tech industry, that a lot of white-collar workers are finally starting to understand what I have known for a very long time, and that is that when you get to be over 40, corporate America is done with you. There is a very good chance, the older that you get in your corporate job, that they are going to find a reason to get rid of you. Once you're over 40, especially once you're over 45, and if you're nearing or over 50, you are a short timer. This is not your grandfather's economy. This is certainly not even your parents' economy, where people could get a job and stay in it for 20 or 30 or 40 years and retire and have a pension or whatever. This ain't that. There's a lot of people who are like, why can't we do anything about ageism?
Before she goes on, I want to tell you a quick story because I was on a phone call not too long ago and I can't give too much information for obvious reasons. So I'll be very vague about this, but I was on a phone call and it was related to work that I do. And I was speaking with a person over the phone and they were telling me how now that they're nearing retirement age, they are getting a lot more scrutiny from their supervisor over stuff that before they were not getting scrutinized over. Like, for example, taking time off, or for certain times that they have a little bit longer of a break, or their work that they're doing is getting combed through with a fine-tooth comb, whereas that wasn't the case before. But now that they're getting closer to retirement age, their supervisor is on their back a bit more. Now, again, this is the story they're telling me. Could there be more to it? Possibly. But this goes into her narrative about once you start to reach a certain age range, the corporate world's kind of done with you and they kind of want to throw you out the pasture. Now, 40 is super young. It's super young. You know what I mean? Like in a lot of contexts. So to think that at 40 or at 45 even, companies are starting to look to divest themselves from you, to me sounds kind of ridiculous, especially if you're with the same company for all these years you work. The amount of institutional knowledge that you have that you can share to people below you and that can benefit the company is almost not even quantifiable.
You know, we got to get these companies in trouble. That's not going to happen. The number of job postings that are fake, that they're never going to hire somebody over 40 for, you can't prove it. There are select individual cases where people have been able to prove ageism is the reason that they either didn't get a job or that they lost their job. But it's only when a person who works for the company says or does something really stupid, like say, well, you're getting old, so we have to let you go. You cannot combat this. You can't fix it. You can't change it. And it's been like this for a really long time, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. And I can tell you, as someone who has had 3 career layoffs, my second one at age 48, and my last one when I was 54, it's not getting any better. You need to have a plan starting at age 40 for what you're going to do to make money if you lose your job and you're never going to be able to get a good paying full-time job again like the one that you had. People without a plan often end up working places like retail jobs, restaurant jobs, hospitality jobs. These are the jobs that are booming in our economy. Unfortunately, they are low paying. They are extremely difficult. They require you to have completely open availability most of the time. There's not much of a path for promotion, and most of them don't have any benefits. Those people, I worked in those industries for 15 years.
And not to mention, like the first lady just said, a lot of them aren't even hiring people who are 40, 50 plus. So do you even have those options?
Those jobs are really important. And, you know, no diss or ding to anybody that works those jobs. But if you have gotten your butt in a cushy office job for the last 10, 15 years, and you are 40 or over 40, you need to have a plan. What I tell a lot of people who come to me for job search advice and for resume help is, what if you knew right now that you were never, ever going to be able to get another job paying what you were making, doing what you were doing? What if you knew that already? What would you do to make money? Now, I'm not saying don't continue to look for work, and I'm not saying that nobody over 40 is able to find another job. Lots and lots of people are able to go on and find another job, but there are a growing number of people who are not. And I have heard from them by the hundreds because of the articles that I have written about ageism and poverty and being laid off when you're over 45. Figure out what you're going to do. I suggest freelancing or consulting or upskilling into another profession that you can either start while you're still working or something that you could activate very quickly with minimal training.
I think that you should always be looking for opportunities to grow in your career. And that doesn't mean climbing the corporate ladder, but that just means always being abreast of new skills and new technologies and things that will make you marketable. Because I think as human beings, we have a tendency to get comfortable, especially if we feel like, oh, we're in a job that we're safe, which is a fallacy. Even if you work for the federal government, people used to say, oh, you're a federal employee, you're safe, you're good, you're retired, you have a pension, you're fine. You see what's happening, right? So I think that we have to take it upon ourselves. I'm saying myself, I'm not 40. I'm not even close to 40, kind of, I guess. We have to take it upon ourselves to always be learning, always be growing, so that we have sovereignty over our own ability to make money. Because as you can see, companies don't owe you anything. There's no loyalty necessarily. And I'm not saying companies are big and bad, some are, but it's also up to us to make sure we're valuable to these companies so that they just can't say no.
For example, some people go into real estate. Some people become a traveling radiologist. Those jobs are in very high demand. But for many of us, myself included, there are physical limitations as to what you can do when you are over 45. And this is why it is just criminal and awful when we see people who are in their 60s and 70s and sometimes in their 80s bagging groceries or working as a greeter or like collecting carts at the grocery store. It's because they really need the money and there's no work available to them. And that area between 40 and 60 or 70, corporate America considers you unemployable if you don't already have a job.
Listen, ageism is wrong. Doesn't matter how old you are. If you're 15, 15, you have to be legal to work, obviously, but you get my point. Or if you're 20, 30, 40, 70. And obviously, depending on the work, there may need to be limitations. For example, if you're 80 years old, maybe you can't work as a person who has to lift a lot of heavy things, like a construction worker, because safety reasons, or you have to be able to pass physical specifications. I get all that. That being said, her saying 40 is just blowing my mind because, again, 40 is not even old. And again, this is her kind of opinion, kind of anecdotal experience. I don't know what kind of data she has, but if this is any way, shape, or form true, it's just crazy.
Why are those of us in midlife not talking enough about how hard it is to get a job at this stage in the game? Here's a little backstory. I got laid off from my job in August due to budget cuts. Budget cuts really was, I worked at a nonprofit. It was really because my previous manager, who was about 15 years younger than me, felt threatened by any type of a successful older female. So she systemically went through and fired or laid us all off one by one. I saw it happen for the 2.5 years I was there. Ended up being me in the long run. So I have been unemployed since August of 2024. Now, originally, I was super gung-ho looking for jobs. I was on Indeed, I was on Idealist, I was on LinkedIn, and I would submit resume after resume after resume and had maybe a handful of interviews. One, even a second interview, ghosted. Every single time. Ghosted. Some of them, I would just submit the resume and like 10 seconds later, get an email back saying, thank you, but we've decided to pursue other candidates. Hello, you haven't even met me yet. My sister went through the same thing a couple of years ago. She's 4 years older than me, and it took her 2 years to find a job. And she really felt at the time like it was ageism. She was seeing people with less experience getting hired for these positions and really felt like it was because she was older, even though she had tons of experience and would have been a better fit for the job. And I didn't really think about it all that much because it wasn't happening to me. And now that it's happening to me, I'm like, oh my God. The people who are getting these positions that I'm hiring for are all like 20 years younger than I am. And even though I have more wisdom, more maturity, more supervision and management experience, more nonprofit experience, more life experience, the hiring departments do not really seem to care. That does not seem to matter. They want somebody young, somebody eager, somebody more energetic. I don't flippin' know. But ageism is real. I have now experienced it twice, once with trying to find a job over the last almost year, and once from getting laid off because my 15 years younger than me boss couldn't handle the fact that I was successful at this job and older than her. She felt very threatened. So it just kind of sucks. It just kind of sucks to be a 50-year-old woman looking for a career and really motivated to work in an industry that's impactful, because that's what I've always done. Have you guys experienced ageism in the workplace? I feel like most of us have. And we're not talking about it. Why are we not talking about this?
I've never worked for a nonprofit, but I have worked in the government sector. And I will say that it's a lot. And I've worked in private sector as well. And I do notice a big difference between the private and the public sector in terms of the demographics of employees. So by the way, what I mean by that is in the public sector, I saw more so that people stayed in their jobs for a long time. And it was even difficult sometimes for younger people to climb the ladder because they had to wait for a person to retire or something like that. So like everything, there's always three sides to a story. Hers, the former manager she had, and then the truth, which is a blend of both. So I'm not saying that what she's saying is not true or that she's lying, and this is her perception of her experience, but I'm just saying I saw a difference. Now in corporate America, in private, yeah, I could, like the other person was saying, I could definitely see it being more of a thing, but she was already in that position, and saying that person was just going through down the line of everyone who was over a certain age and getting rid of them because she felt threatened could be the case, could not be the case. I mean, if she was already in a management position, then what would be her incentive to do that, you know?
I colored my hair and got Botox and filler for a job interview. Now, do I like to do those things anyway? I do. But did I need to do it right now when I'm unemployed? Absolutely not, when I don't have an income coming in. Do I feel strongly enough about ageism, especially ageism against women in the workplace, to make sure that I am putting my best foot or face forward, as it were? Absolutely. If you are particularly a woman over the age of 45 and you are actively interviewing, whether you're employed or not, then I do think that it is something that we have to talk about, and we at least have to acknowledge exists. And I know it also exists for men. So I'm just coming from a place that I can understand, which is the female perspective. Would absolutely love to hear from men in similar situations to see what you've encountered, and particularly if it's the same thing that we encounter. So some other things that I have done to not give away my age in the application process is I've updated.
So as I always say, I don't like to make this channel political or about topics like race or anything like that. But since she's talking about this from a very candid personal perspective, I will say a little story here. Now listen, I say obviously, maybe I look like I'm 40, I don't know, but I'm in my 30s, early 30s, mid 30s. And so I can speak about this more so from a demographic standpoint, from a different perspective. So for me, right, and like I said, I'll preface this by saying I do not like talking about politics or race, but as a young black man, right, or youngish black guy, I do have to, in my mind anyways, make sure that whenever I go to job interviews, I think more so about my physical appearance than maybe someone else might. So I make sure to stay a certain way, to keep a certain aesthetic, maybe dress a certain way. And that's because I understand I live in reality. And so in reality, people are going to have preconceived notions. And you might say, well, it's not our responsibility to break other people's biases and, ways of thinking. And I'll say to that, okay, well, if you want a certain outcome, it is sometimes, a lot of times. And again, some of it might just be in my own double consciousness that I'm hyper aware of this, and maybe I don't need to be hyper aware of it as much, but I'm just saying that it's a thing. So for her, getting the Botox and the fillers and all this stuff and the hair coloring, while I can't relate to those things specifically, I can relate to the idea of paying a lot of attention to my physical presentation because I know that I might be being judged on it more so than someone else might be judged on it.
My resume for only really the last 15 or 18 years of employment. I've been working for 28 years since I was 22. So I didn't even put additional experience upon request. I just laid out the last 15 jobs, essentially my first director role to current day. I also used to say in my professional summary that I was a strategic HR executive with over 20 years of experience. I bumped that down to over 15 because both are still true, but one does not infer age or progressed age, and another one does. Now, the Botox, the filler, the hair color, that is more for the in-person interview process. I had done some gray blending back in January, and I really liked it, and it was going really well. And I just knew that I wasn't going to feel confident and feel like my best self going into a new place and a new space, not looking and feeling maybe a little bit more fresh. Now, I'm not suggesting that anybody needs to do this, and I might get some hate in the comments for doing it myself. And I recognize the amount of privilege that I have to even be able to have the resources to do this without an income. I am getting a severance, so I do have that in the back of my mind. But let's be clear, I have plenty of bills to pay, kids in college, etc. So this was absolutely a splurge, but I really do feel like it was worth it. Whether it's for my own confidence or whether it's actually for the reasons that I believe exist in terms of ageism in the interview and hiring process, maybe that's my own stuff, but I would love to hear from others if you've encountered that.
Hey, maybe it's her own stuff, or maybe it's just objective reality, like I said a second ago. And sometimes it might be blown out of proportion. And again, I'm not the type, I keep saying this, like I have to prove it or something, but I really am not the type to really lean too much into those type of things and see them as handicaps. I try to just be the best person I can be, period, no matter of what I look like, anything. But at the same time, I mean, we live in the world we live in.
Yo, what's up? Gen X. We're getting older. These corporate jobs trying to phase us out. Well, trying to phase y'all out because I don't work for nobody but myself right now, but you get what I'm saying. Got friends, associates, you're getting laid off. You've been on your job 25, 30 years. You capped out on the salary. Now they're trying to bring in younger people at a lower cost. A lot of us are getting laid off. Are you staying in the same industry? And if you are staying in the same industry, are you taking less money? And if you're not, where are you pivoting to keep the level of income and lifestyle that you currently have? This is becoming a real issue with us Gen Xers. So Gen X, chime in, holler at me. What are you guys doing? What are you pivoting to? Do you want to get in real estate? Come holler at your boy.
So here we go. This is a different perspective. This is a male's perspective. And I'm not Gen X, so I can't speak directly from a Gen X perspective. But from what I see here, he is a real estate agent. So he works for himself for the most part, right? So that's what he did. And this tracks with what the other people were saying, is that a lot of times when you are an older worker and you're laid off, you turn to things like consulting, you turn to things like real estate, working for yourself, sales, stuff like that, that you can do that's more flexible, that can leverage all of your years of experience and your knowledge and ability to do what you do well because you've done it so long. So I think that's what he's saying here. That's what he did anyways. And he's asking, what are other people doing? I think that's a lot of times the solution. That plus constantly educating yourself and not getting complacent and not being like, okay, well, I've hit this level in my career. I'm good to go. I'll ride it out into my golden years. Because as we see more often than not nowadays, that's just not the case. Like one of the people said it's early in the video, it's not the same type of economy that your grandparents had, or that your parent, or that my parents are foreigners, that your parents might have had. It's different now. So you have to look at it a different way. Hopefully I live a long, healthy life. So it's something that maybe I'm not thinking about right at this very moment, but I will be soon. And I should probably start thinking about it now, because I'll be at this point one day and I could be in this position one day. What am I going to do? So this is a learning lesson for me right now, as much as it is for anyone else. Let me know, I want to hear in the comment section what you feel about this. What are your thoughts on this? This is always an interesting topic to cover, and something that I'm actually interested in. With that being said, guys, thanks for sticking around this far in the video. I really appreciate it. And until next time, make smart financial decisions.